Dr. Marcus Thorne liked his operating rooms the way he liked his world. Cold, sterile, and under his absolute control. He moved through the halls of Metropolitan General's surgical wing like a shark navigating its own reef, all sharp angles and predatory confidence. His subordinates scattered like pilot fish, all except one, Dr. Anya Sharma. She stood her ground, not out of defiance, but out of a stillness that Thorne found intensely irritating. She was a junior resident, barely 5 years out of medical school by his estimation, and she possessed a quiet competence that felt like a judgment. "Sharma," he barked, not bothering to slow his stride. "The post-op labs for Mr. Henderson?" "On your desk, Dr. Thorne," she replied, her voice even, soft. "I flagged his potassium. It's a little high. I was thinking of adjusting his drip." Thorne stopped dead. He turned slowly, a condescending smirk playing on his lips. "You were thinking? Resident, you are here to do, not to think. Your job is to follow my orders, chart my victories, and learn from a distance. You do not flag my labs. You do not adjust my drips. Do you understand me?" "Yes, Dr. Thorne." "She's too young," he muttered to the head nurse, just loud enough for Anya to hear. "They push them through so fast these days. All theory, no instinct." The nurse, a veteran named Carol who had seen dozens of surgeons like Thorne come and go, just gave Anya a sympathetic glance. Anya said nothing. She simply returned to the nurse's station, her face an unreadable mask. She fetched coffee. She updated charts. She did the scut work that a surgeon of her experience should have been miles beyond. But here, in this polished civilian world, she was a ghost. A nobody. A junior resident who was too young, too quiet, too female. It was the perfect cover. It was a suffocating hell. The overhead speakers crackled to life, shattering the morning's mundane rhythm. "Code Black, Trauma 1, ETA 2 minutes, helicopter inbound." A jolt went through the department. Code Black meant a mass casualty, or a VIP. Thorne was already moving, his irritation replaced by a focused, arrogant energy. This was his stage. "Sharma! With me! Try to keep up!" Anya fell into step behind him, her pulse steady, her mind suddenly, unnervingly clear. The familiar adrenaline was a poison she had sworn off, yet here it was, a welcome traitor in her veins. The double doors to the ambulance bay burst open. A team of paramedics wheeled in a gurney, a maelstrom of activity and shouting. "Male, mid-30s, multiple gunshot wounds, chest and abdomen. BP is 80/40 and dropping. We've pushed 4 units of O-neg and 2 of plasma." Thorne took his place at the head of the bed, the conductor of the chaotic symphony. "Let's get a chest tube in, start the massive transfusion protocol. Somebody get me a fast scan. Sharma, get me vitals and start a central line." Anya moved to the patient's side, her eyes scanning not the monitors, but the man. The wounds. They weren't random. They were a tight, professional grouping. A Mozambique drill, 2 to the chest, 1 to the head, but this one had gone to the abdomen instead. The entry points were small, clean, specialized ammunition. Then she saw it. Tucked into the patient's tactical vest, which the paramedics hadn't fully cut away, was a field triage tag. It wasn't standard issue. It was a small, laminated card, color-coded in a sequence she knew better than her own name, a sequence she had designed herself. A cold dread, colder than any operating room, washed over her. She knew this man, or rather, she knew the men who carried tags like this. This wasn't a gang shooting. This was an echo from another life, a life she had burned to the ground and scattered the ashes of. "Pressure's bottoming out," a nurse shouted. "He's crashing!" Thorne worked frantically, trying to get the chest tube placed. Damn it, his anatomy is a mess. I can't find the space. Anya's eyes were locked on the patient's neck. The jugular veins were distended, a classic sign Thorne was missing in the chaos. The muffled heart sounds were almost inaudible under the din, but she could feel the truth of it in the patient's thready pulse. "Dr. Thorne," she said, her voice cutting through the noise with quiet authority. He ignored her. "Give me another bolus of epinephrine." "Dr. Thorne," she repeated, louder this time. "It's not his lung. It's his heart. He's in cardiac tamponade." Thorne finally looked at her, his face a mask of fury and disbelief. "I will run my own trauma bay, resident. Are you deaf? I gave you an order. Place the central line." "The line won't matter," Anya stated, her gaze unwavering. "We're pouring fluid into a failing pump. The pericardial sac is full of blood. It's crushing his heart. We have maybe 90 seconds. Not a suggestion. A diagnosis. A death sentence. Get out of my way, Sharma," Thorne snarled, turning back to the patient. But then, the impossible happened. The patient on the gurney, a man who should have been unconscious or dead, began to stir. His eyelids fluttered. His head turned. A slow, agonizing movement. Past the frantic chief of surgery. Past the worried nurses. His eyes, clouded with pain, found Anya. Recognition dawned. A choked, rasping sound escaped his lips. A single word, spoken with the last ounce of his strength. "Valkyrie." The room fell silent. The frantic energy vanished, replaced by a thick, profound stillness. Every eye in Trauma 1 swiveled from the dying man to the quiet junior resident. Thorne froze, his hands hovering over the patient's chest. What did he just call you?" The patient's eyes, locked on Anya's, held a desperate plea, a flicker of trust in a sea of pain. "Valkyrie," he whispered again, a ghost of a name from a ghost of a life. "It's you." And then his eyes rolled back. The monitor shrieked a single unbroken tone. Flatline. "He's in V-fib! Get the paddles!" Thorne yelled, snapping back to a protocol that was already failing. Anya did not move to get the paddles. She moved to the head of the bed. Something inside her, a carefully constructed wall of regret and denial, shattered. The quiet resident, the ghost in the scrubs, evaporated. In her place stood someone else. Someone colder, calmer, and infinitely more dangerous. Valkyrie was back. "Forget the paddles," she commanded. Her voice was no longer soft. It was forged steel. It was the sound of command in the face of death. "They won't restart a heart that's being strangled." She held out her hand to the stunned scrub nurse. "Scalpel." The nurse stared, unmoving. "Now," Anya bit out, her eyes blazing with an intensity no one in that room had ever seen. Thorne finally found his voice. "Sharma, what in God's name do you think you're doing? You can't perform an emergency thoracotomy in the ER. It's a death sentence. We don't have the tools. We don't have the sterility." Anya met his gaze across the patient's still chest. "He's already dead, Dr. Thorne. Your protocol's failed. Now you can either watch me save him, or you can get out of my way." Her hand remained outstretched. Scalpel. This time, the nurse slapped it into her palm. Anya didn't hesitate. With a single fluid motion, she made a long incision across the patient's chest, from sternum to spine, just below the pectoral muscle. It was a brutal, savage-looking cut. A clamshell thoracotomy. A procedure so radical, so last-ditch, most civilian surgeons only read about it in textbooks. Gasps filled the room. "Rib spreaders," Anya ordered, not looking up. Someone slapped them into her hand. She inserted the tool and cranked it open, exposing the man's thoracic cavity, the still heart and collapsed lungs, to the harsh light of the trauma bay. "My God," Thorne whispered. He was no longer a chief. He was a spectator at an event he couldn't comprehend. "His pericardial sac is bulging," Anya explained, her voice a detached, clinical monotone, as if she were dictating notes. Tense with blood, classic tamponade. Standard needle pericardiocentesis is too slow and risks lacerating the myocardium when you can't see the source of the bleed. She took a pair of forceps, snipped the sac open. A torrent of dark, clotted blood spilled out, flooding the chest cavity, and the heart, freed from its prison of pressure, gave a single, convulsive beat. The monitor chirped. A weak, thready rhythm appeared on the screen. A collective sigh of disbelief swept through the room. "There," Anya said, pointing with the forceps. "Right ventricle. A through and through from a 9mm. It's a pumper." She plunged her gloved finger into the wound, pressing against the beating muscle of the man's heart to staunch the bleeding. "I need a Foley catheter and a 3-0 proline suture." "We don't have a Foley on the trauma cart," a nurse stammered. "Then the suture will have to do," Anya said without missing a beat. "You," she locked eyes with a terrified-looking intern. "Keep suctioning so I can see. You," she looked at Thorne. "Get ready to cross-clamp the aorta if he starts to bleed out again. You have 10 seconds to remember how." She worked with a speed and economy of motion that was mesmerizing. Her hands, which had once fetched coffee with quiet deference, now danced within the man's open chest, weaving sutures into the very fabric of his heart. She didn't just stitch the wound. She used a specific, complex technique, a temporary purse string suture that would hold the muscle together without tearing it. It was a technique not taught in any medical school. It was a technique developed in the dust and chaos of a black site in the Helmand province, designed to be performed by flashlight on a dirt floor. The bleeding stopped. The heart rate on the monitor stabilized. The blood pressure began to creep upward from the abyss, 80/50, 90/60, a sustainable rhythm. Anya pulled her hands back. She took a deep breath, the first she seemed to have taken since the ordeal began. She had cracked a man's chest open, held his heart in her hand, and sutured it shut in less than 3 minutes. In the middle of the emergency room, the room was utterly silent, save for the steady, miraculous beep of the cardiac monitor. Everyone stared at her blood-soaked gloves, her calm, focused face. They were looking at a junior resident, but they were seeing something else entirely. Awe, fear, respect. Thorne finally moved. He walked around the gurney until he was standing beside her. He looked at the patient, now miraculously alive. He looked at the impossible handiwork inside his chest. Then he looked at her. His arrogance, his condescension, his entire worldview had been shattered in the space of 3 minutes. "Who are you?" he asked again. But this time it wasn't a demand. It was a plea. Hours later, the patient, now identified as Master Chief Petty Officer Jack Riley, was stable in the surgical ICU. The formal surgery to repair the damage had been long and complex, but the critical, life-saving work had been done on the floor of the ER. Anya had assisted, of course. Thorne had insisted. He had stood beside her, watching her every move, handing her instruments like a first-year medical student. He had deferred to her judgment on every decision. Now, she was washing the blood from her hands in the surgeon's lounge. The door opened and Thorne entered. He looked older, humbled. "I looked at your file," he began, his voice quiet. "Top of your class at Johns Hopkins. Flawless residency record. But there's a gap. 2 years. Blank." Anya said nothing, just continued scrubbing her hands. "I would have killed him," Thorne said, his voice cracking slightly. "I was following the book, a TLS protocol, and it would have killed him. You threw the book away and saved his life. I've been a surgeon for 30 years. I've never seen anything like what you did today. Never." He took a step closer. "He called you Valkyrie. That's not a hospital nickname. That's a call sign." Anya finally turned off the water. She dried her hands. her movements slow, deliberate. It was another life, Dr. Thorne. What were you? Special forces? She gave a small, humorless smile. Something like that. I was a surgeon attached to a JSOC task force. The acronym hung in the air between them. Joint Special Operations Command. The elite of the elite. Thorne's eyes widened. The quiet, timid resident he had belittled for months was a Tier 1 asset. "Why are you here?" he asked, genuinely bewildered. "Flipping charts? Fetching coffee? Someone with your skills? You could be running the trauma department at any hospital in the world." Anya's face hardened. The mask slipped back into place. "I left," she said, her voice flat. "I was done." "Done? Why?" She looked away, her gaze distant, haunted. She saw dust and rotor wash, heard the screams. She felt the phantom weight of body armor and the sticky warmth of blood that wasn't her own. "The last mission," she whispered. "An operation in Kandahar. It was a disaster. We were ambushed. The casualty collection point was overrun." Her voice faltered. "I was the only surgeon. There were too many. I had to make choices. Who to work on, who to let die. I made the wrong ones." She looked at her hands, the hands that had just saved a man's life. "We lost everyone, my entire team. It was my fault. I wasn't fast enough. I wasn't good enough. So I buried Valkyrie. I came here to be normal, to be anonymous, to do no more harm." Thorne was silent for a long moment, processing the raw pain in her confession. He had seen surgical arrogance his whole life. He had never seen this kind of profound, soul-crushing responsibility. "From what I saw today," he said softly, "I find it very hard to believe you weren't good enough." The next day, Jack Riley was extubated. His first request, scrawled on a notepad, was to see her. Anya entered his ICU room alone. He looked pale against the white sheets, but his eyes were clear and full of gratitude. "Doc," he rasped, his voice raw from the breathing tube. It was the name they had all called her. "Doc." "You look good, Riley," she said, her professional tone a thin veneer. "Feel like I got hit by a truck," he croaked, then managed a weak grin. "But I'm alive, thanks to you." "Again?" She just nodded. "Listen," he said, his expression turning serious. "I heard what they said in the ER about you leaving, about Kandahar." Anya tensed. "Doc, you need to know," Riley pushed on, his voice gaining strength. "What happened back there? It wasn't your fault. We all knew it. The intel was garbage. It was a setup from the word go. They sent us in there to die." Anya stared at him. "What are you talking about? It was a botched raid." "No," Riley insisted, shaking his head. "It was a burn. Someone wanted our unit, and its commander, erased. And you were just caught in the middle. You saved 3 of us that day before the CCP was overrun. Me, Cutter, and Preach. You were a goddamn miracle worker. You never failed us, Doc. They failed us." The words hit her like a physical blow. For years, she had carried the weight of that failure. It had defined her, broken her, driven her into hiding. And now he was telling her it was all a lie. A setup. As she stood there, reeling from the revelation, a continent away, a red flag popped up on a computer screen, deep in a sub-basement at Langley, Virginia. A fingerprint scan from a routine hospital data entry had been kicked up the chain by an algorithm. The print belonged to a ghost, an asset long presumed dead or deep underground. The algorithm cross-referenced the submission with other data. The hospital. The patient, a highly decorated SEAL. The attending surgeon, a Dr. Marcus Thorne. And a junior resident, Dr. Anya Sharma, whose file had a suspicious 2-year gap. But it was the surgical report that triggered the final alert. The description of the procedure, a clamshell thoracotomy with a modified purse-string suture on the right ventricle. There was only one person trained in that exact classified technique. A silent alarm, dormant for years, began to sound. Valkyrie had surfaced. The next morning, the hospital administrator, a perpetually flustered man named Henderson, paged Dr. Thorne to his office with an unusual urgency. When Thorne arrived, Henderson was sweating despite the air conditioning. There were two men in the office with him. They wore impeccably tailored dark suits that didn't belong in a hospital. They had the bland, forgettable faces of men who were professionally invisible. And they radiated an aura of quiet, absolute authority that made the hair on Thorne's arms stand up. "Dr. Thorne," Henderson said, his voice trembling slightly, "these gentlemen are from the government. They need to speak with one of your residents, a Dr. Sharma." The taller of the two men stepped forward. He didn't offer a hand. "My name is Robert Vance," he said. His voice was smooth, polished, and utterly devoid of warmth. "I'm a director with the Central Intelligence Agency. We have reason to believe one of your staff members is a person of interest in a matter of national security." Thorne felt a chill go down his spine. This was so much bigger than a former combat surgeon hiding from her past. "Where is she?" Vance asked. They found Anya in the surgical lounge, reviewing Riley's chart. She looked up as they entered. She saw Thorne's worried face, and then she saw the man standing behind him. Robert Vance, her former handler, the man who had sent her team into Kandahar. The blood drained from her face. The carefully constructed piece of her new life shattered into a million pieces. The ghost from her past was standing right in front of her. "Hello, Valkyrie," Vance said, a thin, predatory smile on his lips. "You've been a very difficult woman to find." Thorne looked from Vance to Anya, a flicker of protective instinct rising in him. "This is a hospital. Whatever this is, take it outside." Vance's gaze slid to Thorne, dismissive and cold. "This is now a matter of national security, Doctor. Your hospital, your patient, and your resident are all involved. I suggest you listen." He turned his attention back to Anya. His eyes were like chips of ice. "Master Chief Riley wasn't the victim of a random shooting," Vance said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "He was targeted. For the last 2 years, he's been digging into what happened in Kandahar. He was getting too close to the truth." Anya's mind raced, connecting the dots. Riley's words. The setup. "The truth about what?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "The intel for that mission wasn't just bad," Vance confirmed, echoing Riley's claim. "It was deliberately falsified, leaked by a rival within the agency, a man named Senator Michael Corbin. Back then, he was a deputy director. He wanted our unit, and its commander, off the board. He engineered the whole thing." The weight of years of misplaced guilt began to lift from Anya's shoulders, replaced by a cold, rising fury. "Why are you telling me this now?" she demanded. Vance's smile widened. "Because of a beautiful karmic coincidence. Senator Corbin is scheduled for a complex cardiac bypass surgery in 3 days at this very hospital." The implication hit Anya with the force of a physical blow. "No," she breathed. "Yes," Vance said smoothly. "Corbin is a traitor who murdered a team of American heroes. He has it coming. But we can't touch him politically. He's too powerful, too protected. An unfortunate complication on the operating table, however. That's just a tragedy. No one would ever suspect a thing." "You want me to kill him," Anya said, the words tasting like ash. "I want you to correct a mistake," Vance countered. "You're the ghost, the perfect, untraceable asset. You'll be on the surgical team. Dr. Thorne will see to that. You will ensure Corbin has a fatal, irreversible embolism, and then you will disappear again. In exchange, the file on Valkyrie is permanently buried. You get to live your quiet little life. It wasn't a request. It was an order. The same kind of order that had sent her friends to their deaths. She was being presented with a choice, a horrifying, impossible choice. Become the assassin they wanted her to be, violating every oath she had ever taken, or refuse, and face the wrath of a man who could crush her, Riley and Thorne, without a second thought. She looked at her hands, the hands that saved lives, the hands that healed. Vance wanted to turn them into weapons. She lifted her gaze, meeting his cold, expectant stare. No. The single word hung in the air, a declaration of war. "I am a doctor," Anya said, her voice ringing with a conviction she hadn't felt in years. "I save lives. I do not take them. Not for you. Not for anyone." Vance's smile vanished. His face became a cold, hard mask. "I think you're confused, Doctor. This isn't a negotiation. I have your entire service record. The real one. The black ops. The unsanctioned missions. I could have you renditioned to a black site for the rest of your life. I can ruin Dr. Thorne's career with a single phone call, and I can make sure Master Chief Riley's life support machine suffers a mechanical failure." He took a step closer, his voice a venomous hiss. "You will do this, or everyone you've tried to protect here will pay the price for your morality." But as Vance threatened her, something shifted in the room. Dr. Marcus Thorne, the arrogant chief who had once been her tormentor, stepped forward, placing himself between Anya and the CIA director. "Get out of my hospital," Thorne said, his voice low and shaking with rage. Vance laughed, a short, ugly sound. "You have no idea who you're talking to, old man." "I know that you are threatening my staff and my patient," Thorne countered, his fear eclipsed by a sudden, fierce loyalty. "And I will not stand for it." He pulled out his phone. "I'm calling the police, and then I'm calling the hospital board." "That would be a mistake," Vance warned. "No," a new voice said from the doorway. "The mistake was yours, Director." Standing there was a man in a wheelchair, dressed in a hospital gown. Master Chief Jack Riley. He was holding a small, military-grade recording device. "I've been recording since you mentioned my name," Riley said, his voice weak but steady. "Conspiracy to commit murder, threatening a civilian doctor, blackmail. I think that's enough to get a few interesting investigations started, even for a spook like you." Vance stared at the recorder, his face a thundercloud of fury. He had underestimated them all. The broken soldier, the arrogant surgeon, the ghost he thought he could control. Anya saw her opening. This wasn't a battlefield of bullets and scalpels. It was a battlefield of information. And she had the ultimate weapon. "You know, Director," she said, her voice calm and analytical. "I was your task force surgeon for 3 years. I know your entire medical history. I know about the transient ischemic attack you had in Yemen, the one you covered up, the one that means you're a ticking time bomb for a major stroke. I know about the experimental beta blockers your private physician has you on." Vance's composure finally cracked. A flicker of genuine fear showed in his eyes. "And before I disappeared," Anya continued, pressing her advantage, "I documented everything. Every illegal order. Every unsanctioned mission, including your direct order to proceed with the Kandahar raid despite credible intelligence that it was a trap. It's all in a file, Director. A dead man's switch. If anything happens to me, or to Dr. Thorne, or to Riley, that file goes to every major news outlet in the world. Checkmate." The room was silent. Vance was trapped. He was a man used to holding all the cards, and a junior resident had just shown him a royal flush. He stared at Anya for a long, hard moment, his mind calculating, recalculating. Finally, he gave a curt, almost imperceptible nod. "You were always my best operator, Valkyrie," he said, the words a mix of threat and grudging respect. "And my most disappointing." He turned and walked out of the room, his men trailing silently behind him. The threat was gone. For now. In the aftermath, the hospital was abuzz with rumor and speculation. But the truth of what happened in the surgical lounge remained with the 3 people who had been there. Anya knew she could no longer hide. Vance had found her once. He or others, like him, could find her again. The life of the anonymous resident was over, but in its place was not fear, but a sense of liberation. She had faced down the ghost that had haunted her for years, and she had won. Not with a weapon, but with her principles. A week later, Dr. Thorne called her to the administrator's office. The man from the board Thorne had mentioned was there, a retired 4-star general named Marcus Cole, a man with a ramrod straight posture and eyes that saw everything. "Dr. Sharma," General Cole began, his voice a low rumble. "Dr. Thorne has told me everything. So has Master Chief Riley, through official channels. It seems we owe you a great debt, and a profound apology." Anya simply nodded. "Your country asked too much of you, and then abandoned you," the general continued. "I am here to rectify that. We can't give you back your anonymity, but we can give you a purpose." He slid a folder across the polished table. "The Department of Defense has been looking to fund a new kind of trauma center, one that bridges the gap between battlefield medicine and civilian practice. A place to treat the complex, polytraumatic injuries our soldiers are coming home with. A place to train the next generation of combat surgeons, to teach them the things you can only learn in the fire." He tapped the folder. "We want you to build it, and to run it. Here, at Metropolitan General. Full funding, complete autonomy. Name your terms." Anya stared at the proposal. It wasn't just a job, it was a mission. A chance to take the horrors she had seen, the skills she had learned in the darkest corners of the world, and turn them into something that healed. A way to honor the team she had lost. She looked at Thorne, who gave her a proud, encouraging nod. She thought of Riley, and all the soldiers like him. She thought of Valkyrie, not as a ghost to be buried, but as a part of her, the strongest part. "I accept," she said. Months passed. The sterile white wing of the hospital was transformed. The new Center for Advanced Combat Trauma and Special Medicine was a state-of-the-art marvel of glass and steel, a beacon of hope. Dr. Anya Sharma walked through its halls, no longer a ghost, but a leader. Her quiet demeanor was now seen not as timidity, but as unshakable confidence. She wore a new lab coat, the title Director embroidered over her name. She entered a hybrid operating theater, a room that looked like it belonged more on a starship than in a hospital. Her team was already assembled, a mix of the hospital's best surgeons and bright-eyed military medics. Dr. Marcus Thorne stood among them, no longer the chief of surgery. He had voluntarily stepped down, but as her deputy director, eager to learn. On the table was a young Marine, his body ravaged by an IED blast. His case was deemed hopeless by every other hospital. But not here. Anya looked at the anxious faces of her team. "All right, people," she said, her voice calm, clear, and filled with the quiet authority she had finally embraced. "Let's go to work." As she made the first incision, a thought, clear and sharp as a scalpel, cut through her mind. It was her own voice, finally whole. "I spent so long trying to bury Valkyrie. I thought she was the ghost, the trauma I had to escape. But she was never the ghost. She was the one who kept me alive. And now, she's the one who will save them all."